This episode of the Pedalshift Project is brought to you by Cycle Blaze, a welcoming community of people who love to travel by bicycle. Post your own travel journals, follow other people's journals, or talk about bike travel in the forum. All for free at cycleblaze.com. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/146, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline, 202-930-1109, and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Happy holidays, everyone, and Merry Christmas if you are celebrating. It is the 146th edition of the Pedalshift Project, and coincidentally, the 2018 Christmas episode. Very excited to share that with you. We are wrapping up 2018 with two great episodes, this one included. Next week, join in for the end of the year holiday spectacular featuring special guests from the Sprocket podcast as we chat about our favorite things from the year that was. And I'm really excited about that because we just recorded it the other night and it was a fun trip. Hopefully you got a chance to listen to one of the more recent episodes of the Sprocket podcast. We sat in front of the mics for a long time. It was 2 hours. So hopefully got a chance to talk to listen to that. I did a lot of talking, as I'm wont to do. And that was a lot of fun. I'm really excited to have some folks in the room to help wrap up the year a little bit differently than we've done it in the past. So that should be a lot of fun. Check that out next week. You probably noticed at the top of the show that the Pedalshift Project is now opening the door just a crack to podcast sponsors. So I thought I'd take a moment here to mention how this is sort of the new way to support the show's direction. I'm hoping to expand the programming to include some international touring in 2019 and continue to make the show bigger and better for you. I decided that taking on relevant sponsors, and that's the real key here, relevant sponsors, from people, entities, or whatever that serve bicycle touring or are bike touring adjacent as the ticket to make the show bigger and better and to make those bigger and better things happen. You're not going to be hearing stamp or mattress ads and certainly no appeals for you to try boxed meal kits. For real. That is just not going to happen. You are, and I hope I say this every episode, and if I don't, I should, you are a special group, and we're only going to work with cool people and cool companies that get exactly what's going on here. If you're interested in sponsoring episodes of the Pedalshift Project to get your bike travel thing noticed by a set of discerning, and I'll say it again, very cool set of people, thousands of global listeners that are patient enough to put up with my weekly nonsense, check out pedalshift.net/sponsor or email me directly, pedalshift@pedalshift.net. That said, all of this, as you can probably imagine, starts up very slowly. So we're still going to be looking to the Pedalshift Society as being the primary way that I can offset the show's costs. So as I always say, if you like what you hear, supporting the show that way through the Pedalshift Society is awesome. And that's at pedalshift.net/society. If the advertising can pick up the difference, I plan to explore options for the Pedalshift Society members to have an ad-free option down the road. No matter what, Pedalshift Society members can look forward in 2019 to some new rewards beyond just the episodic shoutouts. So stay tuned for that. Okay, enough meta talk about the show. Let's chat bike touring for an hour or so. Next up on the show is an awesome interview with Keith Spangler. And Keith is, well, you'll hear all about it. He had a whole bunch of adventures. Keith is a listener to the Pedalshift Project and is a bicycle traveler and freelance photographer from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. He began solo bicycle touring in 2012. Since then, he has completed multi-day tours in numerous states along the East Coast and along the Gulf of Mexico, which you're going to hear about on this episode of the show. Keith rides a custom-painted surly long-haul trucker outfitted with custom mods. He describes the thing that motivates him in his travels by bike as meeting people and seeing the world. Without further ado, here's Keith. Hi, Keith. Welcome to the Pedalshift Project.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on because I think that you've got a great story to tell about a tour of the southern United States and just some really interesting things that sort of happened to you along the way. So, I always like to start from the beginning, asking what's your bicycle touring origin story? What got you into bike touring?
Well, I'll tell you what, it started back in 2012, and I'll probably always remember it because I just thought, I saw the people with bags on their bikes and stuff like that, and it attracted me. So what I did is my first bicycle tour, I did a couple of evenings and overnights and stuff like that, rides, and then I eventually, one day I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about Rhode Island being the smallest state. And I said, you know something? That's the place I'm going to start. I'm going to do the perimeter of Rhode Island. And that's how I started.
Oh, interesting.
I just went and did it.
Circumnavigating a state, that seems like an unusual, out-of-the-box kind of a thing in a world where so many of us start with ACA routes and things like that. What got you interested in circumnavigating Rhode Island?
Well, I thought, being the smallest state, I thought I could do it. I was planning 9 days for it. And I said, it'll be easy. I won't get lost. I'll just take all the roads that on the way out. I just went all the way along the coast, and then I went west as far as I could. I went south, and I ended up back at the beginning. And that's really the easiest way, what it was.
That's pretty funny. And I like the idea of the fact that it's the smallest state. It's a good thing you didn't have an affinity for things like Montana or worse, Alaska, and that would have been a lot longer to do. What was that trip like? How did that meet your expectations?
It met it really well. It showed the diversity that was in bicycle touring, because along the coast, it was a lot of population, a lot of beaches, a lot of oceans and stuff like that. I really liked riding the coastline. And then as you went further north and started going west, Rhode Island turns into more of an industrial area, a lot of farms then. It's the diversity, the small towns versus the populated tourist areas. And so it filled the void. It really, it showed me a lot of what bicycle touring was about, I thought.
For that tour, did you jump into things? Did you go full on, touring bike, the Ortlieb panniers, or did you start kind of with what you had around in the garage? How did you approach that?
I'm using the same equipment now as I did then, except for the bike, it's still a long haul trucker, but it's just a different color and newer. And I went full in. I got 4 bags. I didn't have a whole lot of camera gear or something like I'm carrying now. But yeah, I just did the whole thing. I just jumped right in. We got 4 bags and everything.
Yeah, that's impressive, because that's a lot of commitment from a gear perspective, which is why it's always I think when folks are sort of a little hesitant to get into things, I'm always like, hey, you don't have to, jump in with the same type of gear that you or I have. It's you can start slow and do the overnight, but when you jump in full, you're not the first person I've talked to who started their first tour with a kind of a big undertaking. So then you kind of want to have a little bit more space in your gear and things like that. So that's awesome.
When I first saw it, I said, those guys have his bag. So I did a lot of research, how to set up the bike. I used online stuff. I've talked to people to get what they did. And then I just evaluated it. And I feel that I came out with a setup that was perfect. And I think it is, because it's still serving me today on a 1,200-mile bike ride.
That's really awesome, because I'm constantly fiddling with my gear, so I'm always feeling like I'm never even kind of quite there. But to be able to nail it, that speaks a lot to the kind of research that you did ahead of it. What were some of your favorite places to do research for gear back when you were first starting?
I just Googled things, people who did bicycle tours. One of the neatest things that I did that I get a lot of comments on is having a setup in the handlebars where I have 2 stems, and the second stem sits below the first one, and it holds a bar, which it was a reconverted shovel handle, and it actually is where my bike bag, handlebar bag sits. My GPS sits on that bar. Anything I want to sit, so that my handlebar is completely free of anything. And so the second stem holds the bar that holds everything else.
I've seen setups like that before, and I think they're really clever. Because are you on drops with your long haul trucker?
Correct. That's correct.
So that gives you the bonus, because with drops, you don't have a ton of space to begin with. So to be able to kind of get that secondary bar to put those accessories on, I mean, I've seen some really sophisticated cockpits. They'll even call them cockpits, which I think is pretty funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be like that when you've got a GPS and you've got space for your phone and things along those lines. So that's pretty amazing. And you jumped right into that. That was sort of, you're like, okay, you did the research and you're like, this is how I want to be able to ride. This is going to give me all the accessories I need. That's pretty impressive.
Well, Tim, things evolve, but the basic setup is the same setup as I had then. And that's what, it just amazed me that the setup stayed the same all along. One of the neatest things I felt as well was when I first brought my long haul trucker, the first one. I bought it. There were some Brooks saddles hanging on the wall at the bike shop. And I said, I rode the bike. Test rode the bike with the original saddle. And I said, what are those? The guy says, that's what people use for touring. And I said, stick one of those on. And I've had the Brooks B7, I think it's B17 Imperial. That's the cutout in the center.
Yeah.
I've had that the whole time. I've had 3 of them.
You've gone through 3 of them through the years.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and that was the day in that bike saddle was the first thing I did. The Brooks is still on there today.
As I've mentioned on the show, for saddles, I've been fine with most stock saddles, but as my Brooks on the Brompton has really started to break in, I'm starting to get really excited when to ride the Brompton more and more frequently. So I have a funny feeling that saddle may end up getting fitted onto the big bike when I do larger tours in the future. They're kind of nice after a while. It takes some getting used to, but boy, they are fantastic. So you circumnavigate Rhode Island. What were some of the other types of tours that you did before the one that we're going to be talking about today? Where else did you go?
I did the Outer Banks, and I started. I was in the Coast Guard then. I'm retired from the Coast Guard now, and I started in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, which was a Coast Guard base. And I went down to Ocracoke, and I went up the Outer Banks, and then back. I rode across Iowa a couple times, and what I did with that was I combined a organized ride like Ragbri,
right?
And I just rode it with all my gear.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and what I learned was it was like brilliant, because while everybody else was hustling and bustling trying to get their gear set up and trying to find it in a big stack of stuff, I just rolled into town. I'd just pull in anywhere I wanted to. Right downtown with all the, fun and stuff. I just pull in, find a church or a house, and ask, can I stay here? And they go, sure.
Oh, interesting. Were you signed up for Ragbri, or did you just do it parallel with them?
No. I always signed up, and I always had an outfitter that would carry the stuff if I needed it, but I never used it.
I've heard amazing things about Ragbri. How would you describe it? It seems like it's a rolling city going across a state for about a week. Is that about right? Yeah,
Tim, I call it an event, not a ride. I call it an event because there's just fun. It's just fun. And you have to do your 60 or 80 miles, a day, but it's full of fun. You know what I mean? So, if you want to make it fun, it can be fun. And I think you put the bags on the bike and it becomes fun. Because people are going past you going, are you crazy? What are you doing? They called you a bagger.
The one time I did an organized ride, I actually carried a pannier full just with my stuff because I was used to it. And everybody was like, why are you carrying this? They'll carry it for you in the truck. Did you get that a lot? Or what was sort of the reaction? It sounds like people were like, what are you doing? Grams. Yeah,
they just look at you like you're crazy. And just like most people do when they see a bicycle tourist traveling, it draws their attention, and they go by and they go, wow. One guy rode by me one day, and I was like in a aero position, and I was just reading the cue sheet. The cue sheet was right in front of me, and the guy goes by. He says, "Are you reading a book?" And I said, "No, man. This is a cue sheet for the ride, But I was such a comfortable position. He thought I was reading a book while I was riding.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, I thought it was cute, myself,
Yeah. All right, so let's fast forward to the tour we're going to talk about today, your tour of the U.S. South. What was your plan for the tour from sort of the early stages, like when you were first kind of noodling around in your brain about it?
Well, Tim, this idea started almost 2 years ago, and I had retired from the Coast Guard. I'm retired 3 years now, but 2 years ago, I came up with an idea. I said, I was in the Coast Guard and I was stationed along the Gulf of Mexico. And our area of responsibility was from Brownsville all the way over to Apalachicola, Florida. And so I was visiting all those places. I was responding, with the Coast Guard to different cases along those coastlines. And I said, I want to ride that. Well, it didn't happen the first year. In the second year, I got really into it early. And after a year of planning, it came to become reality. And so that's really what it's going to be. Initially, it was going to be 1,600 miles. And it ended up to be 1,200 miles, which I can share with you.
Yeah, we'll get into the why on that in a second. So Brownsville to Apalachicola, that was to recreate sort of the service area that you did while you were in the Coast Guard. That's sort of
correct.
The idea. Gotcha. That's really interesting country in terms of just, it's a big spring break area. It's, beautiful areas, a lot of exposed coastline, as we'll get into in a moment. What was your start date? Weather is always an issue down there, as we'll get into, but what was your ideas on the start date?
Well, the way I looked at it was going to be either April or October, November. And April, I still think might have been the better month, but I couldn't do it then. And I said, well, I chose October. And when I did that, I knew that was, people were telling me, like last 2 weeks in October is the peak of hurricane season. Are you crazy? And I just said, something, it'll all work out, and I'm here, I'm home, I'm safe. So it worked out.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, you made it, right?
Yeah. And see, I started actually on October 1st. So that was the goal. Start October 1st and go to October 30th was the goal.
You had the full camping gear. Were you planning on camping most or all nights? Like what was sort of your overnighting type of plan for the trip? And did you have it scoped out pretty well in advance, or were you the type of rider who just rides till you get tired and then kind of figure it out from there?
Well, Tim, I over-research, and people, some of my friends, they actually get on me about that. And because they just take the iPhone, get in the car, get on the bike and ride and figure it out as they go. I'm not that kind of person. I like to be able to figure it out and have my nights planned. I know what I want to see along the way. On this particular trip, just getting to the start was a challenge because I live in Pennsylvania and the start was in Corpus Christi or North Padre Island. And I didn't want to fly. I didn't want to fly. So I had to figure other ways to go. I didn't want to drive. So I ended up taking public transportation. And I don't have the exact miles that I did on public transportation for this trip, but I'm close. I think it's close to 2,500 miles or 3,000 miles on public transportation just to get to the start and home after the ride.
Wow, that's really amazing. What are you talking about? All municipal public transportation, or are you talking Amtrak, Greyhound?
Amtrak.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, Amtrak. My base of I call it home base is DC. Okay, I knew I could get the hub there for Amtrak, so I took Amtrak from DC to New Orleans to Houston, and then that was the end of it. So I had to catch a Greyhound bus and take that to Corpus Christi. And then on the way home, when I got to Clearwater, Florida, I took Amtrak again from Tampa back to DC. So I didn't have to drive a car for 45 days.
That's really nice. I like touring with Amtrak and buses as well. I found that to be a a nice way also, especially on the way back home, to sort of ease back into non-touring life, which I know for so many people it is. For me, at least, I should speak for myself. It can be a bit of a jarring transition, especially for the longer tours, so that it kind of have somebody else do the driving for you, and especially in a little bit more unconventional way, that can be helpful. Did you find that to be the case?
Tim, that's why I did it, because I've ridden Amtrak before. My son and I did a ride from Cleveland back to DC, and I said, well, how can we get to Cleveland? I'm not flying. I just don't like flying, you know. And so we put the bikes on the train and took the train 24 hours out to Cleveland. We got off the train that night, 2:00 in the morning, and I said, we're starting to ride. We're not going to get a hotel. We started riding right away.
You know, it's funny. I've thought about doing the same thing, because there's a train from DC to Cleveland, and that's right. It drops you off at 2 a.m. And I was like, I wonder if I do a little moonlight riding down the old Erie, what is the Ohio and Erie Canal trail. I may do that someday. Who knows?
It was fantastic. Yeah,
so. That's fun. That's fun. You ran into a little bit of a natural disaster situation in the ride. Why don't you talk about how things started and where this occurred and what ended up happening for you?
Hurricane Michael was the hurricane of the season for the Gulf of Mexico this year, and I've been on the bike just a couple of days when the news started to push that. And they were talking about, the idea. By the time I got over to Port Arthur, Texas, I forget how many days it was, maybe a week. It became reality, because I was sitting. I'll never forget it, and because I was in a small roadside convenience store that looked like a Gander Mountain or an outdoor shop. It was all outdoorsy inside. Everything. It was really cool. You had this big screen TV up there. I had this picture of myself with the Weather Channel broadcasting the hurricane, that it's approaching. They're giving you warnings and stuff. And I said, wow. And that was probably the pinnacle of this whole trip, because all along, it got more and more on my mind, because when it hit, everybody probably always heard this, it basically eliminated from the face of the earth Panama City, Mexico City, and any town near there. It basically took it out. And that was right on the route that I was going to use to get to Clearwater from the Panhandle. And so each day of my riding, I was reminded of it by people who I was staying with, when I was camping. People said, what's down there as you go? And you go, we don't think you're going to be able to make it through there. And so I eventually made it through there. But what I did is it's a long story, but I took a car from Destin, Florida to Perry, Florida, and then started my course back down to Clearwater.
So you kind of bypassed some of the worst hit areas in there, if I remember my Florida geography a little bit. Did you run into any of the folks who had been impacted by the hurricane? Because I know when I was in California last year during some of the real wildfire seasons, I one of the strange consequences was some of the places that I was going and camping in ended up being sort of refugee areas for folks who were impacted by that natural disaster. Did you run into that situation as you were cycling towards it or away from it?
No, because I stayed away from it. I stayed away from that damage. And I had people, I was making a real effort to figure out if I should go or not pass through that area. And because it had only been about 2 weeks since it happened, okay, when it wiped everything clear. And everybody, even people that were in town, like just the town over, there was a warm showers person. He said, Keith, he says, something, just don't bother. He says, it's too much of a destruction area. He says, destroyed. He said, there's nothing left here. He said, number one, you won't have any cell service. Number two, you're probably not going to get any food or water. And the roads are just impassable. And I had several people tell me that story. So I ended up just taking that ride, which was a friend of a friend who I stayed with. His friend was in Destin, and he lives in Clearwater. He says, Keith, he says, I'll drive you 222 miles to Perry, which is where my original route was going to connect to go south. And so I said, bingo, is either that or take a bus or rent a car. And this guy drove me 222 miles to get around that stuff. And Tim, we saw nothing compared to what was there, the destruction. But going up I-10, trees were flattened all along I-10. It was amazing. You go down the road and trees would be laying one way. You go about an hour up the road and they're facing the other way, where the wind just miles and miles of trees just destroyed. It was impacting. But Tim, something that I met a lot of people who survived other hurricanes like Katrina, Ike, and the stories that I was told were amazing to me. And that's one of the reasons I went, is to meet the people and to learn about what they experienced, and I did it. I don't know how much you want to go into it, but like there's Crystal City, Ike destroyed it, similar to what Michael did in the Panhandle. And this guy, this warm showers guy, he had lived there, and his house was totally destroyed. Well, he picked me up on this trip and helped me. Let me stay with him for a night. And we woke up and we walked outside, and he goes, this whole place has been rebuilt, Crystal City. And he goes, Keith, right where you're standing, there was 15 feet of water. And he said, when I come back here, this whole peninsula was wiped out. He showed me pictures, Tim. How impacting was that to me? I'll tell you what. To sit there and actually see it and be there on boots in the ground, that'll live with me forever.
Yeah, I can imagine. That must have been a really, and you're a Coast Guard guy. It's not like you haven't seen stuff like this before. So, that really speaks to the devastation that was there. I also think that it speaks to some of the kindness that you received. To the ability to have someone help you continue your tour by, driving you 3-4 hours around all of this. I understand you experienced a lot of this type of kindness on your ride. Tell me more about that.
Tim, that was another thing that I went on this ride for two reasons. To see the world, the things around me, to photograph them. I know it sounds silly, but that's what I do it for. To actually take time and see things and to meet people. That were the two goals. And this trip exceeded it. It exceeded it. And everybody, all touring people that I talk to or I hear, even on your podcast, all say the same thing. Kindness is amazing. But I'll tell you what, it's all very individual too, to your person as you're experiencing it, the type of kindness that you receive. I'll just give you one example. Well, I have so many. But the warm showers guy I stayed with, he let me stay at his house. He had two houses. He had one in Crystal City and then in Port Arthur. And I forgot my glasses and my mirror at his house. And it's now 5:30 in the morning. He drove about 30 miles to drop me off across a causeway that was unrideable. Okay? He says, I can't let you ride that. And I agreed. So at 5:30 in the morning, we're sitting on the other side of the causeway, getting the bike off. And I said, I don't have my glasses or my mirror. It's 5:30 at night. Morning, it's dark. I'm riding down this road, no shoulders. He says, Keith, he says, okay, have a nice trip. He actually drove back to his house, picked down my glasses, then came back across the causeway again to find me down the road sitting in that convenience store. And he dropped the glasses off to me.
Wow. Isn't that great?
I know. It's a silly thing.
No, well, it's funny. I think everybody who listens to this show understands how important stuff like that is. A mirror, for instance, on a ride when you've been riding several hundred miles at least. and you've been used to doing that. You're riding in areas where you knowing what car is coming up on you and where they are relative to you. That's so important. And that's the type of thing that I think it really can make or break a ride. And it's just that kindness of somebody who's sort of like, you know what, I'm going to invest this hour in helping this person out. And I think that's great. That's really great. And you're right. That's what we hear all the time.
So I had a state trooper in Texas. I mean, it was 110 heat index out. Okay, there's no shade or nothing. I was standing along the road on 35, and he rode past me, and he turned around. And I had stories, people told me stories about local Texans told me, watch out for the cops, they can be, have a line there, they might bother you. And so I said, oh, no. Well, here comes the state trooper. He gets out of his car, and he says, you okay? I was sitting there taking some pictures. I said, yeah, I'm okay. It's a little hot. He goes, you want some coffee? You want some water? I got both in the back of the truck. So he went and got me a water, and he sat there, and he goes, where are you trying to go? I said, well, down this town. I forget what it was. And he looked at me and goes, you're going the wrong way. I said, what? It's like an hour and a half back to where I missed the turn. I said, I can't do that, dude. He says, well, let me go on iPhone. So he got his iPhone out because I don't carry an iPhone. I carry a track phone. And he goes, here's a route. So he's out on the side of the road with me. Here comes another trooper. He pulled in. So I had two troopers on the side of the road. Everybody was probably driving by going, there must be some drug thing going on or something, And he gave me directions, gave me water, and gave me tips on where to go and stuff. And Tim, it actually was a better route than the route I had planned.
How about that? These are Texas Rangers, Texas Troopers?
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to the right organization here. That's great.
Yeah, they were super great, man. And I said, can I shoot my picture with you? He goes, yeah, we go back and the hat on. He came out with his hat on. He goes, yeah, I got my hat on during the picture. And so, yeah, stuff like that. I mean, everybody experiences it. And but those unique things, to you as you're riding is something you always remember.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because, I mean, we always talk so much about, and we're going to get into gear and other stuff like that because people always love hearing that. But I always love hearing these types of kind of personal stories because I think that's what sort of is the make or break thing. That's the thing that you always, as you kind of forget the smaller details, the interactions with, the Texas Rangers, the folks who helped you around the storm damage, all those are the folks that you remember. Those are the experiences that you remember. I think that's amazing. But we have to talk about gear and some other stuff because sometimes that stuff is interesting too. And I understand that you had some experience with with solar charging as a way of dealing with your gear. Now, you talked about how muggy and hot it was, but did you get a lot of sun to help with that solar work?
Yeah, solar panel that I was using was a Voltec. I think that's how they pronounce it. And what it does is it charges a cache battery, okay? And then the cache battery has two USB ports off of it. So you can run things as long as you are charging the battery from the solar panel. So it's not direct to the gear. It's to a battery, then to the gear. I only had to charge that battery once with electricity. In 29 days, only once with electricity. I thought that was amazing.
So you were able to, for the whole ride, keep that battery pretty topped off, just showing it
Correct.
To the sun. You didn't have to plug it in except for one time. That's pretty great.
Correct.
That's pretty great. And what were you charging off of that bank battery?
I charged every day. I ran the GPS off of it. That was the main thing. The secondary thing would be my track phone, which is nothing. And then I also charged an iPad up with it when I needed it. So, I mean, I didn't charge a whole lot, but I never had to worry about power. I also had a generator hub on the bike, a Sun 28, and now I use that to charge things as well, mostly the track phone.
Gotcha. So you were generating a lot of electrons as you were rolling there. Where were you mounting the solar panel? Did you have that mounted as you rode, or did you just pull that out when you stopped?
No, it was basically permanent mounted I attached to the rear of the seat and then down to the rear rack. And so it basically sat on, I ran 4 ortlet bags, and then I ran a camera bag, which is an Arkel bag, which was, I reconverted it into a camera bag. That was on the top of the rack. So it basically was attached with carabiners to the seat and then down to the rear rack, laying on top of the camera bag. That's the way it was designed.
Gotcha. So real simple, just sort of angled like that, and it caught all those glorious rays that were coming down and causing you misery during the ride. At least it was doing some good otherwise, right? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So that was the Voltec, and you recommend that, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think they make one that I think 2 or 3 of them that charge the device direct. And if I would have known that, I might have chose that over the battery, just so I didn't have to worry about a battery. But the battery was very sufficient. It worked really well. It never failed me.
The one thing I've heard about these types of systems is that the stream of electrons that come in through a solar is wildly inconsistent, because you as you change your angles and you're moving in and out of the sunlight, the flow is gonna be different. Now, of course, all the electrical engineers are screaming, pulling their hair out right now, listening to me butcher the actual scientific language here. What I've heard is that even though you lose efficiency by having the power bank and also obviously the extra weight of it, at least you don't run the risk of having the ebb and flow of the charge coming through into your phone or your other device creating any issues, because that can sometimes create problems. So it's interesting that they have direct hookups, despite the fact that I think I've heard a lot of folks more recommending using the power bank. Plus, with the power bank, you've got the added bonus of being able to collect all those electrons and then be able to divvy it out amongst all your devices as it was needed.
Yeah, I think what I learned, I used a solar panel before on one of my rides. And what taught me this was riding the Ragbri, where that was my first thought to use. I have to come up with my own source, because when you had 17,000 people looking for outlets, people were taking them off cars and everything else, I said, I'm not going to deal with that anymore. And that's the reason I got the system. But I think like you said, I think having the battery there gives you a lot of versatility, of what you can run, where you can run it. You don't have to be on the bike. So yeah, I think it was a good choice.
I think you just sneakily gave a pro tip for anybody considering doing Ragbri next year. For those who hadn't done it before, it sounds like take care of your own energy needs separately, because you may have a tough time finding that outlet.
Well, Tim, they've made that better over the years. You know what I mean? Where now they do have those power banks where you go. Most of these organized rides do nowadays.
Oh, that's cool.
Like Virginia does the same thing. They have their own power bank that everybody plugs into. You didn't have to really find it, You wasn't running around the gym trying to find a free outlet anymore. So I think a lot of that's going, because people now know they have everything runs off a USB port, so they know they got to find a cord somewhere.
I would love to hear more about your camping adventures as a part of all this. I love warm showers. I love that all exists, but I know that you did some camping as well. How did you find that to be? Because I know that in that part of the country, there are some camping options, but you might have gone long stretches without being able to find an actual campsite. So what was the camping like?
I never did any stealth camping. And I'll tell you a reason why. Especially early on. I actually stayed at hotels. I did a mix. I did hotels, camping, and warm showers. That's the way I would look at it. In Texas, I was told that there is no public land. everything is owned by someone. And so this person who lives there told me, Keith, be very careful where you just say, I'm going to pull off and camp. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, okay? But I did notice the route that I was riding, a lot of the land had fences up. So you couldn't really go off and just camp along the side of the road because there were no trees, there were no buildings that you could get into, and it was like right on the side of the road. So that was my experience with that. I chose the hotels. I didn't really want to do hotels. I was mainly going to do camping and warm showers. But with the heat the way it was, and one of the other things that we didn't talk about was that area of the Gulf Coast, all the way over to Florida, had a lot of rain. And so the mosquitoes were unusually crazy. And Tim, so bad that you would stop, and this is usually in the morning and in the evening when you're setting your tent up or taking it down, you couldn't do it. They would just attack you. And it was amazing. So the camping that I had done was mainly at state parks and at county parks with a couple RV parks stuck in there.
How did you end up finding a lot of these places? Was this just part of your pre-research and you had those scoped out, or were you asking around and finding out about these places?
That I have to give credit to my wife, because I had initially thought, well, I'll just do all these. Initially, I was going to do Coast Guard stations, which I wasn't allowed to do. It didn't work out. So I had warm showers pretty well dotted across there. There's a lot of warm showers in here in this route. And but some of the places where there wasn't, my wife, since I didn't have, a iPhone, she was calling ahead. I'd tell her, I'm going to try to get to this point. Can you find something? And she would be like on the internet trying to find different places, calling people and making arrangements before I got there. So the RV parks and stuff, a lot of them didn't accept tenters. They wanted you to have an RV. Well, she worked her magic and got me into a couple RV parks that weren't going to want me. I stayed in 2 laundromats at 2 RV parks. I pulled in one day, it was really hot, and the lady says, you can either stay outside in the heat or you can stay in the laundromat. I said, there's air conditioning, Wi-Fi, electric, and I can do my clothes. So guess where I stayed?
I think that's a no-brainer right there.
And then the next night, it rained. It only rained on me one night, and it rained on me for about 12 miles. But it was like 6 inches deep when I got to the RV park. And again, the manager came out. She was, lady. She says, "Honey, you can stay in here if you want to, or you can pop your tent in the 6 inches of water." And so, guess what I did? I washed my clothes. I dried my clothes, and I was in good shape.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's great that, because I know of a lot of places where they would have been like, yeah, staying inside is not an option. And yeah, you're out in the 6 inches of water or whatever. So that's good on them and good on you for making the right call, I think, on the.
Again, and that's a kindness I was telling you about. The camping was really good. The place site, what I found was there was not a lot of activity at these campgrounds. The time of year, everybody's back to school. So I had the whole thing to myself. Several state parks. I think I only stayed at 1 or 2 private campgrounds, but they were all super. I was able to have a campfire. I had the place to myself, the restrooms and stuff. So it was the place I stayed were primo. As far as that, and not a lot of big cost either.
That's great, especially with the state and county parks, to be able to keep your expenses low and stuff like that. I'm with you. I love off season. If you can pull that off, you get sort of the same basic great weather, sometimes even better than you would get during sort of the teeth of summer. And you get all the amenities with a lot less hassle. That can be great. I love that.
Just like your Brompton tour, during that time of year was almost perfect except for the weather.
Exactly. Yeah. This last one in outside of Pittsburgh is like I had the trail to myself largely. I don't think I think I saw a few folks on bikes, but yeah, off season, midweek off season, it works out really well. So at the end of every tour, I'm always I sort of very publicly assess my tour and talk about kinds of the types of things that I decided my decision making basically, and I'm curious what your decision making in retrospect, how you see the decisions that you made on tour. Are you rethinking anything that you did? I mean, most of us would say at the end of the tour they wouldn't change anything, but I'm curious if there was any individual decision that you maybe would rethink. I mean, we talked about maybe doing April might have been a better time to do it, but that wasn't available to you schedule wise. What about some of the other decisions?
I did overthink on the train, actually, is when it began, and it got worse as I came home and had more time to think about it. And I guess it must happen to everybody, you know, that you actually start thinking the choices that you made. One of the ones that I think about was not going the original route, the route that I had planned. You know, when I mapped this out, this trip from Corpus Christi to Clearwater, Florida, was about 1,450 miles. I advertised my ride in my brain and to everybody else. It was going to be about 1,600 miles. And what I did was I added some out and backs. For example, in New Orleans, going down to Venice, Louisiana, I visited there when I was in the Coast Guard. And I wanted to see what it was like today, you know. That was 78 miles one way, 78 miles back, okay? Matagorda was the same way, out and back. Those were all included in my 1,600-mile route. Well, I only got 1,200 miles. So immediately I beat myself up on the miles, thinking, you 400 miles, you know, where'd 400 miles go? Well, I didn't take those out and backs. And one of the reasons, the biggest reason, was because it was isolated. They were isolated areas. You know, there was no services there. I learned that as I went. That was one of the biggest things I learned, that it just wasn't a gas station every 20 miles. You could go for miles and miles and miles and not see anything. And the heat index was 110. Something to go, why do I want to ride 78 miles down through nothing and then 70 miles back the other way? Today, I kick myself for that, you know. I also kick myself for maybe not riding through the devastated area of Hurricane Michael, because it would really made it special, you know. But what I feel is, I don't know if it's right or wrong, you make choices then. You're not making them on the train on the way home. You made them at that particular moment. You made them for a reason. And whether it be safety, whether it be mood, whatever it may be, you made a decision and you got to stick with it. You know? And I think I try to keep kicking myself saying, you know, that's what I did it for. But, you know, it's still in the back of my mind. And everybody I talk to says, don't do that. You know, you rode further than anybody else, so I know. You know, but there was a target of opportunity, and I feel like I missed it. You know what I mean? But I did it for a reason, you know, at that particular moment in time. And you have to say it was the right decision.
Totally. And I think it sounds like that, you know, intellectually you are completely at ease with the decisions that you made, but somewhere deep in your heart, some ways you're still, your heart's still sort of, but I totally understand. I go through that all the time, especially when, you know, you have to make an alteration to a route that you were really kind of, you know, there were some emotional reasons for you to visit those old spots. But, you know, when you're sitting there with half of your water bottle empty and, you know, it's 110 heat index and you got to go 70 some odd miles or not, you know, your brain's going to be making different decisions at that point than when you're nice and hydrated and comfortable on a couch someplace thinking about it, or on the train back or anything like that. So it's only natural to kind of, I think, have that push and pull. But that's sort of what is great about these adventures is that you're assessing for yourself as you go along. And then, you know what? They're still there. If you ever want to go back, there's still the opportunity to maybe check that box off if it's that compelling and you're that pulled back to it.
Well, Tim, one of the things about this route was there was a lot of opportunity to doubt yourself. Now, this is me, okay? I'm a very moody person overall, so anything can just like set me off a different direction, and good or bad. But this route had a lot of bridges, especially the part that adventure cycling, they're above this route. And I think I know why. Because there was a lot of places where there's, you cross bridges, but some of them are just like really dangerous. Because the way they were built, the traffic flow on them. And, I got rides across some of them, and that even, was a decision that I had to make. But I side on the side of safety when I do that. And there was a lot of bridges that it scared me. So I made decisions, and let people take me across those. And, whether it's right or wrong, but I think that's one of the reasons why the adventure cycling route runs more north, especially in the Clearwater area. They don't go down there. I guess they go through Houston. But getting across some of the body waters and stuff like that, you take a ride. One guy told me, he goes, "Keith, don't you think that's cheating?" And I said, something? If I could have found a boat, I would have taken a boat. Because this particular guy is telling me, he goes, he had caught a boat ride on his trip. He met some people at a bar, and they took him on a boat. I said, "Fantastic! I'd love to do that. And invite me aboard your yacht for a 3-day sail. I'll do it."
Huh. That's pretty funny. One of the big things I say on the show is you ride your own ride. And, your ride involved, first of all, you took the hard route to begin with because you rolled your own route. You didn't follow the ACA route. You had a special route based on a very specific motive, basically, right? So, the fact that you had to do things other than pedal across certain bodies of water or on certain bridges, that's all part of what your ride was. I mean, so I think that it was the journey more than the mode of conveyance than anything else. But here's the other thing, and I always say this to folks who say, "Oh, well, is it cheating, or did you not really complete your ride if you didn't pedal at all?" The folks that do Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, that whole route from the Arctic Circle all the way down to the tip of South America. There's a place right in the kind of Central America called the Darien Gap. There are no roads. There's no way to get across it. So almost everybody takes a boat of some type, or they fly, or something along those lines. But I can guarantee you, I still count them having bicycled the entire way across from Alaska all the way down to Tierra. So, I feel like, that if that counts, everything counts. So, I think we all ride our own ride, even if it's not a complete from start to finish by pedaling. So that's how I feel about that.
I had a guy, a Warm Showers guy that I met in Houston. He told me this. I was communicating with him as I was riding, just because I had met him. I always try to email people and let them know what I'm doing and stuff. And he says, "Keith," he says, "it's not the destination, it's the journey." And I think that's so cool. I mean, I've heard it before, but that's the truth. It's not where you're going, it's just the journey to get where you're going. And I thought that was pretty cool. I think there's a lot in that.
I totally agree. And you have had quite the journey with this trip, and I think it sounds like that you've got more to come. What's sort of in your brain right now for your next tour? Do you have something thought out?
This is very odd for me because I normally am planning at this time of year, and by January I know what I'm doing. But unfortunately, right now I do not know. And I did briefly look at, I'd like to ride up in Canada. That's been something that I have been thinking about for more than 2 years. And that might be the next place. I don't know. I thought about the Canadian Transcontinental Canadian Trail. I think that's the way it's said. But then I started hearing good things, bad things, mixed emotions. I think that would be an awesome ride if it was a route that was completed. And I think what I heard was that it wasn't completed, but they're sort of making it out like it is.
What I've been hearing, there are parts in the wildernessy areas of Canada that are only single track, so you need a mountain bike to be able to do certain parts of it. So, it might be one of those things that if you had the opportunity to switch bikes or just ride a mountain bike the whole way, then that might be possible. But I do understand that they're going to be making improvements along the way. But there's a lot of controversy around the whole trail because you're right, they are marketing it like it's this beautiful paved trail through all of Canada when it's quite anything but in certain parts of it.
And see, that attracted me immediately because of riding, the Gap, the Great Allegheny Passage in CNO last year. I said, wouldn't that be cool? Try a trail across Canada. That'd be so cool. So yeah, I think Canada would be that's my focus. I don't know if it'll happen or not. I think I'm too far away to just downloading everything off this ride and thinking it out a little bit.
Well, I think that you've got a lot to still process from this ride, and there's so many great adventures to come. I know you're going to end up finding the right one. Keith, thank you so much for being a part of the show and sharing your adventure with us.
Tim, thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank Keith once again for joining the show and for really kind of opening up a lot about what it's like to tour the area of the country that he did with those kind of challenging conditions, but also just finding the grace and the coolness of people along the way. So Keith, thanks so much for joining. I want to once again thank everybody for being a part of the Pedalshift project all this year. I hope you have a happy holiday season. Don't forget, next week we've got the special year-end closeout episode with folks from the Sprocket podcast. I hope you can join us then. And a quick wrap up here about supporting the show through Pedalshift Society. With listener support, we've expanded the show to weekly, added tour videos, moved the tour journals from paid to in-podcast, and helped pay for improved equipment and all hosting fees. And it's all thanks to people you hear in the end credits. Why not add your name to the list? We're talking $5, $2, or even $1 a month helps keep things going, and you can cancel anytime. There's also annual and one-shot options too if you're not into the small monthly thing. Added bonus, it's all working again. If you've had trouble signing up, check it out. Pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lien, Andrew MacGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Dittus, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrance Manson, Noah Schroer, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Brian Hren, Mark Van Raam, Brad Hipwell, Paul Mulvey, Stuart Buchan, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Harry Hugel, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LoGreco, Ruth DeVorsey, Michelle Miller, Matthew Lewis, Michael Baker, Billy Crafton, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Matt Perry, Danielle Jepson, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Bobby Ruppel, Roy Everett, Greg Braithwaite, John Mayer, William Cairns, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Mark Messer, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robber, and thanks all past and anonymous contributors for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available. A big thank you to CycleBlaze for sponsoring this episode of the pod. Go to cycleblaze.com today and find inspiration for your next tour.